Cracks are appearing in the new Tunisian government even before it starts real business. A number of ministers have pulled out and demonstrators are opposing the government's lineup. So is Tunisia making progress or heading for more instability? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm David Foster. Now, a day after it was formed, the new unity government in Tunisia is under mounting pressure. Demonstrators took to the streets, refusing to recognise a transitional government that contained 8 ministers from the deposed President Zine Abidine Ben Ali. And from the government itself, a number of ministers announced they were pulling out, all from the Tunisian Labour Union, which played a key role in the protests against Ben Ali. Announcing his government, Prime Minister Mohammed Ghannouchi said its aim was democracy for the country.
The
government has decided to free all the people imprisoned for their ideas, their beliefs, or for having expressed dissenting opinions. Our top priority is to issue a draft Pardon Act, and the government promises to open all channels of dialogue with all the unions and syndicates, and will allow them free function and speech.
Well, here now to talk about this at some length from Washington, D.C., Nuruddin Jebnoon, Assistant Professor at the Center for Contemporary Arab Studies. In Doha, Youssef Boundel, Professor of International Affairs at Qatar Universities. And on the line from the Tunisian capital, the opposition leader Mohammed Ghannouchi. Monsieur Marzouki's just returned home after many years in exile in France. And may I ask you, first of all, Monsieur Marzouki, you've said you want to run for president. When will you make an official announcement?
Yes, but this is not the problem. The main problem, as I told it many times, that we have a free election and that the people of Tunisia could choose his president with the maximum of guarantees that the election would be free and real. So this is the main problem, and I am afraid that the condition of this free election are not currently existing in Tunisia, because the problem is that we get rid from the dictator, but we didn't get rid from the dictatorship. You know, the ruling party is still in power, and the ruling party who supports the dictatorship pretends to organize the election. So I'm not confident that he will be capable to lead the democratic process. So
let me ask you whether you intend, therefore, to work against this government. Do you want to see the collapse of the current government?
Yes, of course, because we are asking for a real government of a real national unity, and a government that everybody would trust to lead to the real democracy. Nobody can trust a Ministry of Interior to organize a free election while everybody knows that he was at the service of the dictator 2 weeks ago. It doesn't work. This is why we are asking for a real government with real powers and with a real national unity. You know, they talk about national unity, but the government is currently coupled only by the ruling party, the pillar of the dictatorship, and the parties who were recognized under the dictatorship.
Well, do stay on the phone, stay on the line for us, Monsieur Marzouki, because I'm going to bring in Nuruddin Jebnoon, listening to this from Washington, D.C. You heard what Monsieur Marzouki has said. He's announced that he wants to run for president and that he wants to see this government fail. Is that likely?
Yeah, this is my position, which was like spread yesterday within a communique here in D.C. to the media, to the American outlet media. And I think like this band of thugs and criminal hasn't any right to rule our country. You know, Tunisian, our heroic people, like get rid of this dictatorship, and we don't need like to have those folks like leading the country as they lost their legitimacy and their credibility. They were involved on crimes against Tunisian people, and they must be tried, not on the government and the Tunisian government. This is not a legitimate government, and those guys must stand down.
Well, Monsieur Marzouki, you've called for the former President Ben Ali to be sent back from Saudi Arabia to stand trial. Do you think that's likely?
I hope that the government of Saudi Arabia would accept that they are not hosting a former head of state, but former head of mafia, a real criminal, you know, and his last crime was to send the militia against the Tunisian people, killing and trying to put the chaos in the country. And he's really a criminal, and this is why they must consider him as a criminal, and they must send him back to Tunisia to get to have a fair trial with his wife. And the problem is also is that we are asking every and every institution to help us to find where the money stolen to the Tunisian people is, and to have it back in Tunisia, because those criminals have taken a lot of money from our country, and we need it badly to improve the economic situation of the poor area like Sidi Bouzid.
Let's bring in Professor Bouandel joining us in Doha. If the government does collapse, and we've already seen a number of ministers pull out, will that be another step on the road to proper revolution?
Well, I think that this government will collapse, and obviously the Prime Minister Ghannouchi is not necessarily credible at all, because Tunisia, which had 2 presidents for 55 years, had about 3 presidents in less than 24 hours. And obviously what we heard today, that the withdrawal of some of the ministers from the opposition is indicative of the unpopularity of this particular government, and I believe that it will collapse, and this will pave the way to finalizing the project for which the Tunisian people rose.
Well, let's hear from some people on the streets of Tunis, out once again voicing their anger against many people, including some of Ben Ali's ministers who'd been put in positions of power in the new government.
We are not expecting anything from these criminals. Their laws are made with the blood of the Tunisians. They are assassins. They are criminals. Can you trust a liar to the ones who has been supporting a dictator? We don't want them anymore. If they don't understand, what language do I have to use?
The general opinion is that we won't accept anybody from this party anymore, whatever their reputation, their integrity, whether they are good or bad. We don't want to take that kind of risk anymore.
It's normal. It's a step in the right direction. They are criminals. I have no direct information, and no one from my family was arrested, but according to the media reporting about the crimes they have committed, God willing, it is a step in the right direction. We want political freedom, social freedom, and religious freedom.
Professor Bouandel interrupted you to say, to bring you what the people on the streets of Tunis were saying, but I want to go back to the idea of this government collapsing. Might it not be a wise idea to keep it going for a short period of time, if that were possible, while some sense of stability were returned ahead of promised elections?
Well, I think that this government obviously was brought in very, very quickly without thinking about the implications. The Prime Minister himself, for instance, when Ben Ali fled the country, he declared himself as president under Article 55 of the Constitution. That suggests that he still himself believed that Ben Ali was the president of Tunisia, and he mandated him to rule the country in his absence. Obviously, this decision was reversed 24 hours, less than 24 hours later, when the Speaker of the Parliament became president of the country for the next 45 to 60 days. The fact that the Prime Minister made it clear in an interview with a French news channel that he spoke to Ben Ali, for instance, yesterday, and updated him about the situation in Tunisia, suggests to everybody on the streets that he is a friend of Ben Ali and maybe he wants him back. Obviously, the composition of this new government, with the most important ministries falling in the hands of the old guards, is another indication that this particular that Ben Ali must have gone, but his system is there. Thirdly, and perhaps very telling, that some of the opposition leaders, and in particular the Islamic Party, Nahda and Rashid Ghannouchi, are not allowed to come back to the country yet.
Well, can I just go back to Washington, D.C. to talk about the Ennahda Party and the other Mr. Ghannouchi, who's head of this Islamist group. Professor Jebnoun, would either he, that Mr. Ghannouchi, who's exiled at the moment, or Moncef Marzouki, who we heard on the programme a short while ago, would either of those two men be possible candidates for the presidency in the eyes of the people?
Why not? You know, the Islamists there belonging the political arena, and they have the right as other like Tunisian citizens to be like candidate and to be involved in the political life in Tunisia. But let me go back to the to this government, please. One point. You know, Ben Ali may have been dead, but constitutionally Ben Ali is still there. The issue is this constitution, the provisions of this constitution are neither democratic nor liberal. And those folks try to say to Tunisian people that we can still there and we can still in charge and will be able to do whatever we want to do. What we need now is to rewrite this constitution, is to throw this constitution in the trash and to rewrite a new constitution which will build a new political system, a parliamentary system. We don't need a presidential system. We need a parliamentary system that holds the prime minister responsible before the government of the people with a limited prerogative. This is what we need.
Let me put you in touch from Washington, D.C., Professor Jebnoun, with Moncef Marzouki, the opposition leader, come back a few hours ago to Tunisia. The two of you can talk to each other. And Professor Jebnoun, maybe you'd like to put one of those points to Monsieur Marzouki.
What we need, we don't need like a national unity government, because now when we say national unity government means all the movement, all the political parties are represented in this government. What we need is a provisional government, is a temporary government which hasn't any executive power, just to manage the situation for 6 months, and within the 6 months will be able to write a new constitution which will put like a new system, a political system, which is must be a parliamentary system, where the president has like a limited prerogative, except in the domain of sovereignty, like national defense and foreign affairs. But the main power must be under the control of the prime minister and the parliament.
Let's get Monsieur Marzouki's response to that. Joining us from Tunisia just a few hours after arriving back in the country. What do you make of that idea?
Well, it's a very interesting idea. I think that we have to look for another political system, and but let me tell you again that the problem is.
Okay, well, we have had problems on the line before now. Monsieur Marzouki, thank you very much indeed, but we'll try and fix these. Back to you, Professor Jebnoun. You've taught at the Army College in Tunisia. You've been involved in a lot of the academic side of running the army there. Where do you think the army will stand at the moment in Tunisia?
Look, Tunisian army has a tradition of being like a republican army, which never been involved like in political affairs. It's very professional. It's a small army. The problem today is not with the army. The problem is with security forces. As you know, we have like more than 180,000 policemen in Tunisia. And all those security services, the majority of them are infiltrated by militia. And today, what we should do is to put all those security services under the control of the Ministry of Defense and of the Army, and to implement the so-called reform security sector. This is what happened after the collapse of the apartheid system in South Africa. We should reform this security apparatuses in Tunisia. Imagine with this, with 180,000, this number is larger than the 120,000 in Great Britain, yet the population in Tunisia is 6 times less than the British population. This is the main stake for the Tunisian like rulers in the future, is to reform the security sector.
Professor Boendel, I mean, for that to happen, for there to be some control over the massive security forces there has to be a certain sense of stability. And I'm not really sure at the moment whether anybody can really see that coming within the next month, 2 months, or whenever.
Well, I agree with your guest that from Washington, D.C., that the biggest challenge for Tunisia is the control of these security services, because, like he said, the Tunisian army has not been involved in political affairs and indeed played a very important role in getting rid of Ben Ali. The situation is that there are some followers of Ben Ali who still believe that the situation is winnable and he could come back, and that they have been involved with some of the atrocities, should I say, in Tunisia. But the situation is very, very difficult to predict. I guess it's a very big challenge. It could not be done overnight. The politicians will have to be extremely careful in how to approach the situation by looking at basically those who made the decisions as opposed to those who carry out orders. It's very, very important to basically differentiate between basically the people on the ground and their leaders.
And we've mentioned Monsieur Ghannouchi, the exiled Islamist leader. We've talked to Monsef Marzouki on the programme. In terms of a future leader for the country, whether it be presidential or whether it be prime ministerial, what other names spring to mind? I mean,
I do. There are so many different systems: presidential, parliamentary, semi-presidential. But I myself prefer to see Tunisia and adopt a parliamentary system. This is the type of political system which was adopted by many countries around the world that have experienced a transition to democracy. In the Middle East in general, Tunisia in particular, Algeria and Egypt, political parties are now more than tools in the hands of the political leadership or the authorities. So I think if Tunisia adopted a parliamentary system, that will give more weight to political parties, to true competition, and people would join political parties in order to not necessarily to further their political ambitions.
But isn't this what's happened at the moment, is those people who joined the cabinet from without, who were not before this members of the government, object to the fact that members of Ben Ali's party were still in there, and that there's not real pluralism accepted by either side at the moment?
Well, I mean, the situation is very unusual as we stand, because it seems to me that negotiations to form this government were not thought of properly. Obviously, some of the opposition political parties and some of the organizations joined this particular government without truly negotiate the rules of the game. They just wanted to capitalize on the newly found freedoms. And obviously the Ben Ali's party holds the majority of the seats in this government, and most importantly, the most important ministries. Something needs to be done: either reform Ben Ali's party, or make sure that these members join the new government as technocrats as opposed to members of that party, to see Tunisia go through this most difficult period of the next 3 to 6 months.
Professor Jebnoun in Washington, D.C., I mean, are you worried for your country at the moment, or hopeful?
Look, I am not worried. This is a heroic people. This is a great people. This is the first country that abolished slavery in 1848, established the first constitution in the Arab world in 1868, abolished polygamy in 1956, and it's the first Arab country that fired its dictatorship in January 14th, 2011. I am optimistic, and Tunisian people will not accept less than covering its political rights, which means being able to lead with this country without this political mediocre class.
And what about the economy in Tunisia? Do you believe it's going to suffer because of what's happening at the moment?
I think, you know, the economic infrastructure still well, and we have like the so-called the know-how, the savoir-faire and economy, and Tunisia is still like a viable country where the foreign investors would like to invest. What we want to do is maybe to amend those, sorry, those code of investment, just, you know, to bring like foreign investment to Tunisia.
Professor, sorry, I'll give you a chance to take a sip of water and clear your throat. Don't worry about that for the moment. Just take a break for a second. Let's go back to Doha and Youssef Bouandel. What do you think is going to happen within the next month or so in Tunisia?
Well, I think what will happen is this, that there will be a review of the composition of the government, which is important to respond to what has been going on the streets. Obviously, I'm cautiously optimistic about Tunisia's future. The second one is the Prime Minister the last few days promised that he will pursue those responsible for the atrocities, and most importantly, perhaps, pursue those who were responsible, who were corrupt politicians and of Tunisia, and establishing a number of commissions for political economic reforms to prepare for the eventual elections.
But when Mohammed Ghannouchi, we see him on our screen at the moment, is described as being extremely close to the ex-president, does he have any role as the current Prime Minister or indeed in a future government?
Well, I mean, my personal opinion that he will probably go because he's not seen as credible. I wouldn't say legitimate because it's too early to talk about legitimacy today, but he's not credible at all. He made that, in my opinion, two very big mistakes. The first one, when he declared himself president, that assumes that he still believed that Ben Ali was president and he will be there as an interim president until Ben Ali comes back. And the second big mistake he made was to declare publicly that he spoke to Ben Ali in his exile in Saudi Arabia. That doesn't sound very good signals. He may be a member of some government as a technocrat. He's a very good economic person, and he would offer a lot of help to Tunisia, given his long experience in government, which is about 12 to 13 years as Prime Minister.
Noureddine Jebnoun, I mean, you're based in Washington, D.C., you spent a lot of time in Tunisia, obviously it's your home country. What's it going to take for you and other people like you to want to go back to Tunisia?
No, we'll go back, you know, but what we want like a kind of guarantee from a kind of provisional government, which about all those political reform, about political overture toward all the political movement in Tunisia. What I would like to say, like, you know, Tunisian people now is under freedom and will not accept any step back. Tunisian people is covering all its rights and will not accept any compromise with those guys. Let me say something about the Prime Minister Ghannouchi and the President of the Parliament, Mr. Mbazza. Those two guys are well known by consecrating like authoritarianism, Ben Ali's authoritarianism, either through corruption or through all those laws passed by the Parliament. And Mr. Mbazza was the head of the Parliament, and who was the guy who accepted, you know, to vote those legislative provisions about, you know, the re-election of Mr. Ben Ali, or, for example, you know, giving Ben Ali a chance to be again a president in 2014. And means those guys lost their credibility. They are not legitimate and they haven't any credibility, and they must leave. They must leave.
There we must leave it. Thank you very much indeed. My guest Noureddine Jebnoun in Washington, D.C., Youssef Bouandel in Doha. Thanks too to Moncef Marzouki from Tunis. And thank you too for joining us on this edition of Inside Story. We welcome your comments. Drop us a line at insidestory@aljazeera.net. Insidestory@aljazeera.net. For now, goodbye.